Before the age of 3, you had already lived through an entire chapter of your life. You came into the world, you opened your eyes and saw everything for the very first time. You listened to your mother's voice for the first time. You experienced the taste of food. You took your very first steps. You spoke your first word, yet you remember none of those moments. Not even a single one. Most people think the explanation is straightforward. Your brain wasn't developed enough yet. You were simply too young. But that explanation isn't entirely accurate. And the real reason is much stranger than most people imagine, because your infant brain wasn't failing to capture your experiences. It was actually recording all of them. Those memories existed, but something erased them. In 1905, Sigmund Freud was the first to give this phenomenon a name. He called it infantile amnesia. Babies are capable of forming memories. We know this with certainty. During the 1980s, psychologist Carolyn Rovey Collier at Rutgers University conducted a clever experiment. She attached a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. The babies quickly discovered that kicking made the mobile move, and they enjoyed it immensely. When the same babies returned several days later, they still remembered. They immediately began kicking again. Even 2-month-old infants could retain that memory for a few days. 6-month-old babies remembered it for several weeks. So infant brains can learn. They can store information. They can retrieve it. But those memories do not remain forever. By the time adulthood arrives, every trace has vanished, and for many decades, scientists couldn't completely explain the reason. The first part of the answer is biological. The hippocampus, a small, curved structure deep inside the brain, drives memory formation. It allows you to take a lived experience, a birthday, a conversation, a walk through the rain, and turn it into an episode you can later replay in your mind. In adults, the hippocampus works alongside the prefrontal cortex to label, store, and retrieve these experiences. But in infants, this system is still far from fully developed. The connections linking the hippocampus and the cortex are still under construction. Important regions such as the dentate gyrus, which serves as a gateway for new memories, are not fully matured until roughly ages 2 to 4. As a result, an infant's brain could create short-term memories. It simply couldn't transfer them into long-term storage the way an adult brain can. But that explains only part of the story. And what comes next is arguably even more surprising. In 2014, 2 neuroscientists in Toronto uncovered something that changed our understanding of infant memory. Sheena Jocelyn and Paul Franklin at the Hospital for Sick Children proposed an idea that sounded almost unbelievable. What if the very mechanism that builds your brain is also responsible for erasing your memories? This is what they meant. During the first years of life, the hippocampus generates new neurons at an astonishing pace. This process is known as neurogenesis, and it is vital. These new brain cells help establish the neural circuits you will rely on throughout your life. But Jocelyn and Franklin believed there might be a trade-off. Every time a new neuron becomes part of an existing network, it can disturb the connections that were already in place, the very connections that were preserving your memories. To investigate this idea, they conducted experiments on mice. When they artificially boosted neurogenesis in adult mice, those mice began forgetting things they had already learned. And when they reduced neurogenesis in infant mice, those young mice retained their memories longer than usual. The findings, published in the journal Science, suggested a deeply unexpected conclusion. Your infant brain wasn't incapable of keeping memories. It was simply occupied with rapid growth. The same surge of new neurons that constructed your brain also disrupted the memories stored within it. Your earliest experiences didn't disappear because they were never recorded. They disappeared because your brain kept expanding, creating new structures while dismantling old ones. But there is yet another layer to this story, and it may be the strangest aspect of all. To form what researchers call autobiographical memory, the kind of memory in which you are the central character of an event you can mentally revisit. You need something that most people rarely think about. You need a sense of self. You must understand that you exist as an individual, separate from everything around you, and that events are happening specifically to you. In the late 1990s, developmental psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage argued that this was a crucial missing element. Before roughly 18 to 24 months of age, infants do not recognize themselves as distinct individuals. A classic experiment demonstrates this quite clearly. Place a small mark of rouge on a baby's nose and sit them in front of a mirror. Before 18 months, babies treat the reflection as though it were another child. They do not touch the mark on their own face. After 18 months, they do. They realize that the reflection belongs to them. And this emergence of self-recognition closely matches the earliest age when autobiographical memories begin to form. In other words, part of the reason you cannot remember being a baby is that there was no fully developed you yet, at least not in the way you experience yourself today. There was no inner narrator organizing experiences into a story that belonged to someone called you. Which leads to a rather unsettling question. If you lacked a continuous sense of self, and the brain that stored your earliest experiences was physically rewired beyond recognition, is the baby in your old photographs really you? Or is it someone entirely different? Someone who occupied the same body, but whose mind was gradually dismantled and reconstructed, neuron by neuron, into the person you eventually became. There is one final piece to the puzzle: language. Developmental psychologist Catherine Nelson spent years examining how children create enduring memories. Her conclusion was that language does more than describe memories. It helps organize them. Before you could speak, your experiences were stored as raw sensory impressions, sounds, textures, feelings, and light. But without words to structure them, those impressions had no framework to connect to. Once children begin talking, and especially once they start discussing past events with adults, remember when we went to the park? Their ability to form lasting memories improves dramatically. Language provides memory with a framework. Without it, experiences are like water with no vessel to contain them. They exist for a moment, and then they fade away. And this idea is supported by evidence, not just theory. Psychologist Chi Wang at Cornell discovered that the age of a person's earliest memory actually differs across cultures. In Western societies, where parents often describe experiences, ask questions, tell stories, and help build personal narratives, the earliest memories usually begin around 3.5 years of age. Among the Maori of New Zealand, whose oral traditions place exceptional importance on personal history and storytelling, average first memories can reach back as far as 2.5 years old. In certain East Asian cultures, where early childhood narratives focus less on the individual, earliest memories often begin closer to age 4 or even later. The culture you grow up in literally influences how far back your memory extends. So, what really happened during your earliest years? Your hippocampus was not yet fully prepared to create lasting memories, and once it began doing so, the flood of new neurons disrupted the circuits that contained them. You lacked a developed sense of self that could anchor those experiences, and you lacked the language needed to give those experiences a lasting structure. It wasn't caused by a single factor. It was the result of everything happening at once. Every human being who has ever existed has gone through this process. Every person you have ever known carries a blank space where the first years of life should be. And the reason is not that your brain was too primitive. It's that your brain was occupied with something far more important than remembering. It was in the process of becoming who you are. And that transformation required, quite literally, destroying the person who came before.